Welcome back to the Start and Scale podcast. I'm your host, Jack Brandwood, and in this series, we're diving headfirst into the world of tech with the people who are coding the future from the front lines. This is the place where we refactor the way you think about scaling tech teams, debugging their journeys, reviewing their stories, and pushing boundaries to ship better insights. Whether you're a seasoned techie who's seen your fair share of legacy code, an aspiring professional ready to deploy your skills, or just fascinated by the world of technology, this episode will give you unique insights and practical takeaways to add to your backlog.
As somebody that isn't a line manager, you can still have loads of influence.
So grab your headphones, commit to this listen, and let's sprint into another episode. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Hi Dan, thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jack.
Good. Well, I'll say thanks for coming on, but we've actually come to you today.
Yeah.
In the gorgeous iVendi offices, everyone can see.
Welcome to Colwyn Bay.
Yeah, we're going to go crabbing after this, I think, is the plan. No, I'm only joking, but yeah, thanks for having us. And yeah, we've known each other for years, but still not seen the offices, so this is the first time. And yeah, look, I always like to start these things with a really deep question. Who is Dan Glenn?
Who is Dan Glenn? Yeah, that is a deep question. So I guess right at the core of me is Dan Glenn, the family man. So, you know, I have a wife. We've just celebrated 25 years together, which is fantastic. Did
Congrats.
our trip to Ibiza, not clubbing. And then my 3 kids as well, that I have, 2 of which are at uni now, so they're getting older. So that's sort of at the core of who I am. I think those, you know, very immediate, intimate relationships that we've got there. But from a career point of view, who I am, I'm an engineer at heart. That's you know, what I've done my entire career, software engineering, and you know, throughout that I've gone into more senior positions, and then architecture, which I enjoyed thoroughly as well, and then into the more people leadership kind of roles. At heart, though, like sometimes I still go home and do a little bit of coding. So I think, like, deep down in the kernel of Dan Glenn is a frustrated software engineer still. That's when I'm in my happy place. Yeah.
Do you find it's? I know you don't do software engineering every single day now.
Yeah.
Do you find it's hard to keep up with the latest trends within engineering, especially if you're not doing it every single day?
I think it's always been hard to keep up with the latest trends in engineering, and so it depends on what you're doing in your company to focus it in on what you want to do. It's probably the same level of difficulty, you know, in a leadership role. You know, I do, you know, read newsletters and blogs and watch YouTube about what's going on in the industry. So I try and stay up to date. It's probably no more difficult or easy now than it ever has been, because there's still such a proliferation of technology and tools you can be using and languages and all that stuff. So it's as hard as it's ever been, I'd say, to stay up to date with it all.
Yeah, and this is a question that should come to me there. If you had some advice for software engineers out there on how to make sure that we're keeping abreast of the latest stuff, anything you would recommend?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it depends on what they're doing, right? But you know, I get a lot of value out of going to meetups and hearing what other people are doing, speaking to other people, even if it's just virtual. You know, watching you know, what people are saying about the kind of things that they're working on. Now, historically in my career, I've always watched people and read people that are a bit more experienced than me, a bit better than me, so that you're always sort of aspirational in terms of what are people that you see as role models are doing, and learning from that. You know, I subscribe at the moment to, I can't remember his name. It's Georg something, the newsletter, Pragmatic Engineer, which for me right now is a really good source of inspiration and information. And he talks about more high level things, you know, leadership, structure of companies, structure of teams, and things like that. But he, like me, I think, is an engineer that's come out and gone into leadership roles. So I find that really useful for me at the moment. But for engineers out there, yeah, just find people that you think are doing good things, good role models, listen to what they're doing, go to meetups, speak to people. You know, I go to the Manchester Architecting Manchester meetup, co-organised that, And there's some really good discussions that happen there, for instance. So that scratches my architecture itch still if I get to go to those. So yeah, just get out there and see what's happening and what's relevant for your role models.
I kind of love that because it's software engineering and IT in general, because it's so quick in the way it's moving forward and changing. You kind of need to be passionate about it. Otherwise, it is just you've got homework every single day, basically.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And, that's, I guess, what I'm alluding to by saying I'm a frustrated engineer, because that's when I'm, that's why I got into this business. What I enjoyed and still enjoy is that technical side of it. If it is homework, as you say, it's going to be a slog every day, isn't it? It's like any job, I suppose. If you don't really find any enjoyment in it, then it's going to be a tough day. Hard to get up in the morning.
No, absolutely. And I want to go into your career and your background and how you got to where you are today, because I think there's some really interesting lessons that you could share on the podcast. So look, obviously you weren't always in the position you are today. Always been in IT, but weren't always in the position you are today. So I'm going to ask you to draw something. The reason for it is our vision here at Tact is to create a world where everyone gets their dream job. And I want to ask, before you got to where you are today, what was your dream job, and could you draw it for us? Or what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah. As a sort of 10, 12, 13-year-old, I always thought that being a pilot would be a great job for me. Not even a fighter pilot or anything cool, Top Gun like that, but just a commercial pilot. That kind of appealed to me. So possibly not the most exciting thing, but that's kind of what I thought would be interesting. And funnily enough, my son now is, sometimes thinks about that as a career as well. So there must be something in the genes, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's a good story I'll tell you later about my grandfather was hit by a plane when he was running along a field once. So maybe that's how it got into our genes. That's a funny story. But yeah, so I'll do my best to draw this somehow now.
Okay. You did. Dan made the fatal mistake of telling us that he did do GCSE art.
Oh yeah, got an A as well.
And he got an A. Well, there you go. So it has to be good.
Many years ago. Right. So what does a plane look like? Here we go. Something like that.
It's a good start. Very good start.
And then there's me in the front window there, holding onto the steering wheel or whatever you call it.
Nice.
Don't think you call it steering wheel in a plane, do you? But, yeah, then you get a bit of a tail. Don't know what a tail looks like.
So you wanted to be a pilot. So what? Yeah. So why? What changed? Do you think?
Well, I think that sort of technical engineering side of it. I think you imagine that control panel, all the buttons and switches in front of you, and there's something quite tech about that, just being faced with that, and then controlling something so big, and having people, all those things appeal to me. So what changed? So I did engineering at university. I did electronic engineering, funnily enough, and when I started doing software as part of that, the quick feedback and ability to move at such pace with software really appealed to me. And so then after graduation, I looked for software jobs rather than electronic engineering jobs. But it's that same theme of technology and engineering running through that's kept me engaged with my career.
And was it easy enough to go from electronic engineering to software engineering?
Yeah, I didn't come out of university with a computer science degree, so I guess I wasn't as well qualified as people that do computer science degrees.
Sure.
And it was a part of the course, because software, even back in the day when I was at university, was an important part of a lot of engineering principles. And so for electronics, you were it was important to be able to simulate things and build software. So maybe it was even an advantage. That's the way I'm going to spin it, in that I had to use software to solve problems pretty early on, rather than learning about the theoretical side of it so much like a computer science graduate might have. And that's what appealed to me, was the notion of having a problem, building something to solve it, realizing it wasn't perfect, but being able to turn it around and fix those problems so fast that that immediate feedback, as opposed to, for instance, with electronics, you're having to, reprogram a chip to do something and then plug it into a board and then test it with different inputs and outputs. So there's quite a longer process in terms of the feedback cycle of knowing whether what you've worked on is doing what you wanted it to or not. Whereas with software, it's like, right, build, compile, run it and test it.
Wow.
So that I think that's what appealed to me most about it. And I've always found it very creative, software engineering. There's a perception that it can be quite formulaic, but on the contrary, I've always found it a very creative process, writing software and even architecting systems and all of those things. I think I get a similar pleasure to that than, say, playing the guitar or something like that. It's a creative process. You get into your flow state, and that's always appealed to me. Yeah.
Well, I can imagine you have to be creative too. In fact, could I show the camera the picture?
Sure.
I need to show everybody at home. If you're listening, if you're listening, look at the video. That's the picture. GCSE art has served you well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think because it's such a problem-solving heavy industry, of course you've got to be creative, right? To get around things that perhaps you at one point couldn't. I mean, I was speaking to someone recently who said they were kind of addicted to it, or got addicted to software engineering because they had that aha moment, kind of like, oh, that's the solution to the problem that I've been trying to solve. And that's how they fell into it. But yeah, so that makes complete sense. But your career then from electrical engineering at university to get into software engineering, I guess what then happened?
After I graduated?
After you graduated, yes, yeah.
So I was looking for work. I had two job opportunities I was looking for. One was working for an embedded software company in Tamworth, and the other one was working for a big American consultancy in Virginia, in America. So the choice was obvious to me. No offense to anyone that's from Tamworth. It's got a lovely service station. But I had the opportunity to go out there and do something adventurous and be out in America, sort of learning my trade of software engineering. So I had that sort of stroke of luck, got into a consultancy, worked there for a year. And you know how most people have imposter syndrome and don't think they're good enough, right? But I legitimately wasn't good enough. I was working for a big consultancy, and I'd done just this one part of a course. It wasn't a computer science degree, and so it was tough. It was a baptism of fire, if you like, and feeling like other people knew way more than me, which they did. But that was such a good grounding for me in my career, in terms of learning how to overcome a bit of that imposter syndrome kind of thing, and just say, well, I'm gonna dig in and do my best. And so I worked there for a year, and then worked with the same company. They moved me to Germany for a few years. So I worked in Germany, working on telecoms projects. These were, and then moved to London as well for a little while before I carried on elsewhere in my career. So that was my break into software engineering, if you like. And when you work for a big consultancy like that, there's a lot of support. You can there's a lot of role models, a lot of people to help you up and show you what good looks like. So that was, I think that was looking back, that was a good break for me to be exposed to that environment. And it's interesting. I don't think I'd work for a big consultancy now. I prefer a company like the size of iVendi, or somewhere between 50 and a few hundred, that kind of level, where I feel like you can be more dynamic, you can be more agile. The decisions you're making having impact sooner. It probably goes back to what I was saying before about why I like software engineering, is that fast feedback. And sometimes in a big consultancy where you can get frustrated with dependencies on other people internally or externally, and it can be quite slow. You can do big things, but it can be quite slow. And so I'm a bit more energized working for small to medium-sized companies now, I think. Yeah.
That makes complete sense, yeah. It's because I think that's a lot of the frustrations that people have if they do work for a consultancy or a digital agency or anything like that, where they are creating work but they're not really getting to see it in its its like full, I don't know what you would call it, when it goes live, they don't get to see
market,
how. Yeah, exactly. So I can understand.
I've seen that with contractors as well.
Oh, really?
I did contracting briefly when I was at the co-op.
Huh.
But, I speak to quite a lot of people that are contractors or have been contractors. And one of their frustrations and sometimes why they move to perm is, they go in, they do a load of work on a project. And then as it's about to go to live, they're like, well, we don't need you anymore. So they don't get to see it through to, a production environment and then this thing that they've built that they care about and love. They have to say goodbye to it and then go and build another one. Whereas when you're working in a company, you get to see that through the full life cycle, for good and for bad, right? It can be, you get a bit, oh, I wish I didn't do it like that. There's a lot of moments like that as well, right? But, there's a certain satisfaction about seeing something go live and then, over the period of several years, seeing it bed in and be successful. And I think, that's one of the reasons why I didn't stay in the contracting world, but rather wanted to move to work for a company permanently.
And did you start your people management career at co-op?
No. Ironically, I don't think I actually line managed anyone at the co-op. I was in there as a lead architect. I think was my title. So line management I'd done at previous places. I think the first place I did it was at is probably at Victor Chandler when when I was working in Gibraltar. So it was a bookmaker out in Gibraltar, and going in as a senior engineer and picking up some line management experience there. So that was probably the first time I picked it up. And that's an interesting one as well, right? Because that's certainly not something that I nor most people had been trained for or had a degree in, is how to manage people. And so, I had to learn on the job. And I think that's true for 99% of people that are, in engineering, in line management roles. They're kind of learning it on the job. And if you're at a company like iVendi and we have people that help us, and we've got programs and experts around us to help with the people management, but not everywhere is like that. And so there's a lot of poor line management in the world and in engineering, and that's just a symptom of engineers being given these responsibilities without any guidance as to what that means or how it should be done. So I've seen that quite a lot.
And I can imagine with those people who were individual contributors and they say, oh, this person's fantastic, so technical, they're amazing. Surely the next step for them, the logical next step, is to become a people manager. That's how people progress in companies, right?
Yeah.
And it must happen so much where that they are given that responsibility, they fail at it because they don't have any support and they don't know what they're doing, rightly so, and then think, oh my God, that's not for me. I could never do that again.
Yeah, exactly.
And they get scared straight, and they're just like, oh God, no, I'm just going to stay. It must be that must be a vicious cycle that happens.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I've definitely seen that and had to coax people back into trying it again with a little more support this time. Because line management usually it's fine, right? And it's mainly a problem when you have to have some more of the difficult discussions. If as a team you're not succeeding in some way that was expected, and so you need to talk to people about how they could do things better or how we could try and do things better. Those are uncomfortable conversations sometimes for colleagues to have, because it's often not just a colleague, but you consider the people you work with friends as well, and so it's a difficult dynamic. And when you're used to just being in the same group and having that bit of banter and slagging off management and all that kind of stuff, which is inevitable, right? But then when you have to sort of have some of those conversations yourself, it's a hard thing to do, and without the support about how to approach those conversations, so it's not a personal thing. It's just, hey, we need to talk about this. People usually aren't given the tools to do that, and so it's a difficult thing to do. And so I think you're absolutely right. It can be once bitten, twice shy. So if you get into that environment, you find it really difficult and uncomfortable, and you think, well, I'm not going back to that. I'll just stay as an individual contributor.
Yeah.
And we have a path for individual contributors as well, and one for people that are willing to pick up more people management as well. So just because it's not for you doesn't mean that you can't progress. Well, that's how it should be, and how it is here at iVendi. If you've got really strong engineers that either don't want to do it or aren't good at it, that's fine as well. You need a mix of people.
For people in those positions that are, because like you said, over the past, I must go say like 7 years, I've seen it being more acceptable to admit to not want to go into people management, but also have the opportunity to progress and go into like a principal role or whatever it may be. For those people, I think part of what they feel like is, how can I have the same impact as someone who is managing, say, a team of 7 who are also managing a team of however many people? How can I have the same impact as that one person managing all these people as me just doing my thing, one thing? What would you say to them, do you think, if they came to you and said, but Dan, I know you're saying all this and I can add value, but how can I have the same impact as someone that's managing a team of 15 or whatever?
Well, yeah, and it's a good question. And I think within a company of a certain size, not a massive consultancy, but certainly less than 100, as somebody that isn't a line manager, you can still have loads of influence, right? And the role title will change company to company. Here we have a VP of R&D who is a very senior person in the company, doesn't have any line management responsibilities right now, but has been at the heart of steering the technical direction of iVendi and where we are today, and continues to do so. So for people that don't want to yet, or want to fulfill their ambitions from a technical point of view, there's usually some seniority thing to climb, right? You can be a developer, senior developer, principal, staff engineer, whatever it's called at different companies. For me as well, I moved into architecture, which, and inevitably at each of these progressions, you become just a little bit less hands-on in terms of coding, hands on the keyboard. But architecture was good for me. I felt like I was still having a really important influence on the success of the company and what we were achieving, but without picking up massive line management responsibilities as well. So I think in companies up to a certain size, there's a place for individual contributors, or people that don't want to line manage more specifically. There's usually a place in a tech company for people like that to rise up. There is a ceiling, I guess, because ultimately you need whoever's at the top of the tech in that company, whether it's a CTO, CIO, they have to be a people person. They have to have people management responsibilities, in my view. And so there is a slightly lower ceiling probably for somebody that's not willing to do people management, but there's still loads of influence and loads of good things they can do, and they become very, very senior in a company and very influential, which is what most good engineers want to do. Yeah, a great answer. It's something I've never thought about before. I just, as we're having that conversation, I thought I'd ask it. So going back to your career, so Co-op and then Manchester Airport Group, right? Yeah. And that was, I think that's where I first met you. Yes, it will have been.
Manchester Airport Group. Well, everyone had heard of Manchester Airport Group at the time.
Yeah.
They were going through this digital transformation effectively, weren't they? And it was an interesting time for them. I remember they were in the bunker, which was like it was a bunker, right? It was
literally a hangar. It was like a warehouse.
Right,
on the outskirts of the airport.
Yeah.
It felt like a real startup, and at that point I think there were only 12 of us or something when I joined, or something like that, and then we started building up from there. So it felt very sort of bootstrapped and startup-y, even though in reality we had a big parent group that was funding it.
Best of both worlds, right? I mean,
best of both worlds, exactly. Yeah, there aren't many opportunities like that. So it was really fun. And then we built that up to, gosh, I can't remember what the numbers were in the end. It was like about 100 people or something, was it?
Wow. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
And not all tech, but across Mago or Cavu as it's become rebranded now.
That's right.
So that was really good experience. That was building something from scratch with lots of talented people. Recruiting some of those talented people myself, and so building up the team. And when some of it was through acquisition as well, some of the technology that we brought in. But it's interesting when you're starting something, when you're from bootstrap like that you're on the hook for all those decisions. You can't blame someone that was before you because there was no one before you, and so you have to. That was a good lesson in accountability. And nobody ever does anything perfectly, and there's a few things I'd probably do differently at Mago, but it was great to sort of take responsibility and accountability for the decisions that we'd made, the people that we'd hired, the organization that we'd put in place. It was really good. And then we moved out of that warehouse into shiny new offices, actually on the airport proper, with the gym and all, and the table tennis table and all that cool stuff. And then I really got a lot out of that role because we built this technology. We built a platform that made a big difference to the airport group's revenues in terms of the non-aeronautical revenues. Yeah, making a big difference to the non-aeronautical revenues, so parking, retail, things like that. And we made a big difference for the Manchester Airport Group, and then turning that into an internationalized SaaS platform that we could then take to other airports around the world outside of our group was a really good challenge as well. And something, one of the things that I'm feel proud of from a career point of view is that we did that, we internationalized it, we took it to several airports around the world who were then able to use the same technology that Manchester Airport Group was using to build their non-aeronautical revenues. And so that was something to be proud of.
And before that, you hadn't done anything like that before, right? Before going into that role, in terms of like, it was your first people management role? Formal people management role?
When I went into Cavu or Mago, no, I think I ended up with some line management. I went as lead architect there.
Got you.
And the engineers went, reported into a different line there. As I progressed in that role and became the sort of head of technology there, then I did have all the engineers reporting into me eventually. But when I started, it was a pure architecture role. So scratching that tech itch, which was great, and building something. And then throughout that journey with Mago, that's when I did pick up probably the most significant people management experience before coming to iVendi as well. So that's where I probably learned the most. Yeah.
I was going to say with the learning element, I think it's quite nice to hear someone like yourself who I speak to people who used to work at Mago and they speak so highly of you. You talk about imposter syndrome. You talk about you kind of picked up the tools on the job pretty much.
Yeah.
How? Like, what lessons would you give for someone in a similar position?
Well, I think the fact that people talk about it now and know what it is, and I hope that it's that people realize that most people feel a bit of that, right? Going into it, especially into a new role where you tend to be stepping up a bit. There's always going to be that anxiety that I don't know what I'm doing. The person I've replaced or the person that didn't get the role may have done a better job than I'm doing. So I think it's normal, and that's the most important thing. I think, and I'm glad that people are talking about it. You go to meetups and you can see online people talk about imposter syndrome and things like that. So just knowing that that's a thing that everyone has, I think is good. It almost lets you put it to the side and think, okay, that exists, but what do I think that this role should? What does good look like in this role? And how am I going to? What am I going to do today, tomorrow, next week to head towards what I think good looks like. And I'm going to walk out this room, and in the next week I'm going to make some mistakes probably, right? And that's okay. And you learn to identify those and correct them as you're going along, because it's rarely a straight path, right? And it's this path to success is a wavy one. And so that course correction, just based on the experience that you've got, is invaluable, because that acceptance that you probably aren't going to get it right every time, but when you haven't, to be able to course correct it back and still get to the destination, rather than throwing good money after bad, and just going down a path that you can't see as the wrong one. So just do what you think is right. Have someone to reflect with, whether that's somebody that is coming in and giving you some guidance in a professional sense. Maybe you've got a mentor or someone that you can talk with at work. That's really beneficial, just to kick things around and be a little bit vulnerable and say, I'm not sure if this is right. So that's definitely helped me. That's definitely some advice I'd give to others, is find people you can just, if something's on your mind, you're not sure something's right, just find someone that you can trust to talk to. Even if they're not an expert in it, that process of talking about it, talking through it, usually helps crystallize things in your own mind.
Yeah.
So that'd be my advice. Find someone you trust in yourself, and know that you're going to make mistakes, but you'll correct them. And often you've been given the job for a reason, because you're probably better at it than your self-belief would say at the moment. So yeah, those three things, just that's what's carried me forward anyway.
So you scaled Mago, obviously not single-handedly. You were part of a team, and the Mago business grew from 12 to over 100 people. You were the talk of the town, I remember, at the time in Manchester. Looking back on it, what allowed you to be so ready to scale the way you did? Was there any particular factors that were put in place?
Yeah, I mean, that environment of having the wider group. So Manchester Airport Group is Manchester, Stansted, and East Midlands airports.
Yeah, was it Brisbane at one point, or have I made that up?
Well, no, that's one of the people we sold the platform to.
Oh, right. Okay.
So yeah, but the group itself owns those 3 UK airports. So they're quite big as a group. So they were able to incubate Mago as a startup. But the other big benefit of having the group with those 3 airports was that they were our customers as well. Our initial customers for these platforms we were building. And so as we built them, we could roll them out within the group. We could see the benefits that we were getting in terms of revenue and things like that. And so, like I say, the Mago experience is quite rare, because we had the support from a group. We were starting it almost from scratch, and we had built-in customers, because the group was our customer as well. And so we had a proving ground for it. So that made it quite, relatively easy, compared to other people that are working in startups that are, scrapping to find customers, scrapping to find investment and things like that. So we were looking at Mago from that point of view, and that helped us to succeed, I think, because we were able to crack on. We get fast feedback from our customers, because the group were our customers. We could see if something was working or not. We had industry experts available to us. So yeah, it was that kind of environment, I think, that allowed us to scale up quite quickly. There are obviously architectural things that allowed us to scale up from a technical point of view. But in terms of looking at us as a startup, it was probably that environment where we were somewhat lucky to have that investment and customers and strong leadership as well. We had.
I guess to do that in almost perfect conditions is great, because then it shows, right, okay, this is how it should go. Yeah. Ideal scenario. This is how it should happen. So when you go to then do it at another place, you're like, right, I know how it should go. I get it. And then let me just take on these challenges as they come along, right? And because you left Mago and went to iVendi. Yeah. And you've been here for how long now?
It'll be 4 years in December.
4 years. Yeah. Okay, great. So talk me through what's happened at iVendi. I know loads has happened. So
so iVendi's been really interesting. So 4 years, let me place myself in time. So, for the first couple of years, we were recruiting quite hard. Thanks to Tact for helping so much.
There you go. That's one.
And we did a lot of hiring. We had some attrition as well. But we grew from, I can't remember the exact numbers. It was like 70, 75 up to 100 and something at the peak. Oh. And then we've kind of breathed out a little bit. And so we are, I don't know what our exact numbers are. I should know, shouldn't I? But we're less than 100 again, and we're sort of holding level at headcount for the time being. So that's where we are. So it's been interesting in terms of people and recruitment and reshaping the teams. I think we've probably grown up a little bit in terms of the processes and software development that we do at iVendi. We've got a little bit more structure around delivery, product, how delivery and product work together with engineering, making sure we've got a good focus on, those relationships between those parties, make sure we're focused on the things that we should be working on, and delivering the right value to iVendi, which is ultimately what we're here to do, right? It's been interesting in terms of, we've taken the platform that's been quite UK centric for a decade, and we've internationalized it. So that's been a really good challenge, both from a product point of view as well as a technology point of view. So we've now got our German enterprise customer running pretty much the same platform that we've got in the UK. So that's going out to lots of their dealers. So it's in their showrooms and on their consumer-facing website. So that's something we're very proud of. That's been a really interesting journey because, when we're working with an enterprise customer like that, that's we're supporting to take this technology to market so that they can take it to their dealers. There's time frames. It's not just, well, let's just make it. We've got as much time and money as we want to make it as perfect as we can for that market, but rather, we had timescales in mind that we wanted to get this out to market. And so the German regulatory market isn't the same as the UK one. The integration we've got with the bank there isn't the same as the integrations we've got with the banks here. And so it wasn't just a lift and shift. And, when in that kind of environment, you correctly should incur some product debt and some tech debt, so, making some decisions that allow you to get to market a little bit quicker, but you're kind of conscious that you're going to have to pay that off afterwards. And so we incurred some product debt and tech debt to get that to market. We've paid off a lot of that, but not all of it. We're sort of managing that debt, which is the right thing to do. You should never feel obliged to pay off every bit of tech debt because it might not be the right use of your time, or product debt for that matter. So, as we roll out further into the German dealers with our enterprise customer, or we look at other territories, we've got country managers in France and Spain as well, then we have to continue to balance that, those decisions about what do we do to get something to market today that might not be the strategic best fit versus, okay, we need to use a certain percentage of our resource to pay off that debt that we incurred last year to get us to market and get the revenue coming in. And so that's been a really interesting balance for me about how to manage that debt. And it's not just technical debt, but the product debt as well.
So with technical debt, it's not just let's try and get rid of all of it now. It is an element of prioritization.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like financial debt, right? You can go into debt to buy a car. You go into debt to buy a house. And so you use debt to get something quicker. than you would have been otherwise, and then you have to pay it off. And it's a really good analogy. It's a good name for it, tech debt and product debt, because it's the same thing. You can consciously and deliberately incur those kinds of debt to get to somewhere quicker. But you have to also be aware that you will have to be paying the interest on it, because that debt, if you don't do anything about it, it will get bigger, it will get more painful. And so you need to have in your plans a plan to pay it down, but not necessarily entirely, right? It's like having a mortgage or something like that. You don't necessarily plow every spare penny you've got back into paying off that mortgage, because there's probably better investments that you can do with that money. In your personal life, it might be going on a holiday or something else. But in a work environment, rather than spending 20% of our resource on just paying off that debt, or even 100% of it to pay it off sooner, that doesn't make sense. It makes sense for us to manage that debt, make sure it doesn't get too painful, but have much of our resource building new product, going into new markets, getting new sources of revenue. And as long as you've got an eye on that and you can afford to pay the debt, you don't need to pay it all off. It's okay to retain some, as long as you're aware of it and know that you're not paying that off now because you're doing better things with your time and money.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
And you can never not have any zero technical debt, because if you did, you would never release anything. Is that right?
I mean, not necessarily. If you're, I suppose it's possible that you can build something, and you've got the time and space to do it as what you think is perfect for the requirements that you've got right now. So from a starting point, it's probably theoretically possible not to have any. So you launch something to market, you've had enough time to, maybe it's a side hustle you're doing or something like that. And so you think, I'm doing this because I want it to be perfect. So it's theoretically possible not to have tech debt and product debt. But it's certainly unusual. I think most companies that are more than a month old have probably incurred some tech debt or product debt along the way, if not, before they've even started. So it is theoretically possible. I think every company in the world, probably that is a technology company, will be managing a degree of tech debt and product debt. Yeah,
interesting. It's a great way to think about it as someone who's not technical at all, don't know if you can tell. It's a really good way to think about it. You've been in leadership position for quite some time now, most lately at iVendi. Leadership lessons that you've come across, any that you can share with us?
Yeah. I think one of the things I've learned over my last couple of roles is, probably like most humans, I kind of like to get a consensus and get people on board and get a sort of wider group consensus about the direction of travel. And that's kind of my personality, I think, as much as anything. And so, sometimes what I've learned is coming into roles like iVendi, I maybe spent too much time trying to build up that consensus, even when I've kind of got a view of, right, we're going to be going in this direction. This is the right thing to do. You will probably spend too much time bringing people on that journey of why. And so, one of the things is, I think good leadership sometimes looks like, strong, decisive leadership rather than strong, consensual, bringing people in leadership. And so, one thing that I've learned in my role is to sort of almost dial it towards the strong, decision-making leadership, because I think from my experience, teams, can be more effective in that kind of environment. And so, and this is interesting for me, right? Because, like I say, my personality, my starting point is to try and make everyone happy and bring out, this is what we're going to do. Do you agree? Do you agree? Do you agree? And that works, but it can take a long time, and probably nobody not everyone is going to agree anyway. And so at certain points, I think, when I look back and think about some of my leadership experience, I think that being more decisive would have been of benefit for me, even though that's not necessarily, doesn't come from a natural place in my personality. I think that the teams that I've worked with would have probably benefited from a bit of stronger, more direct leadership than that, rather than the consensus building. So that's one lesson that I've learned about my experience in my last couple of roles. What's another one?
That might be the only one. We can always do a follow up, a blog or something like that. But that's a really insightful look into it. I think, again, people tend to have to go the other way, right? Like, they can be too opinionated, and you go, I need to dial this down now. I need to make sure I'm winning hearts and minds, and I need to
exactly.
But you had to go the other way with it, which is really
that's what I think. Yeah, that's what I've discovered about myself, because everyone's different, of course.
And what made you? What got you to that realization? Was there a particular moment, or just naturally you reflected on it and you thought?
I think it's mainly on reflection, isn't it? When you've looked back at certain projects or things that you've done. And it's like, and maybe it's some partly the benefit of my engineering background, and like I'm a frustrated engineer and I've done architecture, so I sometimes have an instinct for, well, I think we should do it this way, and it can be quite frustrating sometimes if you have to persuade people or not persuade them and talk about it, and it can be quite time consuming, and you end up with people, 3 different parties who think different things, and then it's almost like you create, by getting them to try and agree, you just are getting them to disagree more with each other. Whereas if you come in and say, well, this is what I think, and if you've established some credibility from engineering and architecture, then you can cut through some of that, and you're not going to take everyone with you, and people might not agree with the decision, and then you'll be judged on the outcomes of how it actually went, and that's how you can sort of build trust in that strong decision making. So I think that building of consensus it's about trust, but it's not the only way of getting trust. You can also get it from that strong leadership and showing by example, and hopefully by making most decisions that you're also teaching people and bringing less experienced people up on that journey about this is what a good decision or a good don't know what I'm trying to say. Yeah, being a direct decision means, because I see a lot of leaders as well that are naturally more like me, that spend too much time gaining consensus. Then I see other leaders that are on the other end of the scale that don't spend any time trying to bring the team with them. And both of them can be successful, right? And so I guess what I'm talking about is I'm trying to get in the middle of that, but I probably need to dial it a bit more towards the direct decision making in my own leadership style. And everyone's different, and there's no one way of doing it, but yeah, that's for me.
I think there'll be so many more people than you think that would resonate with that. I mean, I know I have, especially since setting up Tact, and there's times where, again, you go down that route, and then you're talking about it for ages, and then you think, right, well, who's going to make a decision? And you go, oh wait, hang on, I'm the guy supposed to make a decision and say yes or no, right? Really interesting. Okay, thank you. And just step away from people management for a moment, because I'm conscious of time. I do want to get to this. Should software engineers be worried about AI? I'm sorry for the clickbait question, but I need to ask the question. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good question, because I think probably a lot of software engineers are worried about it. And my kids are, like I say, are going through university. Like 5 years ago, I'd have said, software engineering it's like a trade that it's kind of always gonna be there. And I'm less sure about that now. So I think it is a good question. It's not just a clickbait question, as you say. Should they be worried about it? No, they shouldn't be worried about it, but they must be engaged in what's going on with AI. when I first started doing software engineering back when I was in America and that job we talked about before, you know, you'd have a text editor and you'd write the code and you'd compile it, and then, you know, you'd run some tests against it. And then IDEs became better and better, you know, integrated development environments. And so you could autocomplete, you know, and, you know, you'd control space and it'd tell you what methods are there and you could select it. And so that was a massive productivity saver, just having an IDE, and it did syntax highlighting for you. It did the tab spacing and all that stuff for you. And it just took some of that stuff that you didn't really care about that much and allowed you to solve problems quicker. It was a big step change in productivity, you know, the IDEs. And if you were to ask a developer today to work without an IDE, they go, I couldn't possibly do that. And so I think that's where we are with AI in the early days of that. You know, we've rolled out Copilot, and so not everybody uses it though at the moment. I am convinced that probably in just 5 years' time, it'll be like that IDE equivalent, right? Where you say, well, if I was to take these AI tools away from you, software developers would be horrified in the same way that you said if you were taking the IDE away from them now. So I'm convinced it's a productivity tool, and like with an IDE, developers should be able to be more productive. I don't think it's going to take away. It's not going to mean the end of developers. You know, if for people that have played with it, right, they'll know that it's amazing. It's great, and it can write code. But for those that have actually tried to take that code and put it in and not put enough rigor around a human looking at the code and making sure that it does what you think it's going to do, and it does it in a safe way, in a secure way, and there's no API keys pasted in there or, you know, any of that kind of stuff. You need to have that experience as a seasoned software developer to get the full benefits of it. So, you know, in my view, a software engineer going through their career need to learn how to use it, whether it's in Copilot, whether it's in ChatGPT, or whatever's coming next, in terms of bringing these things together. If they can combine their experience as software developers and as humans doing it with the productivity gains that should come out of the AI generative building of code, then they will be the best developers that are on the market, and they will be the most productive, and they will you know, retain their value in the industry. So going back to your question, should they be afraid of it? If they're ignoring it and not using it, yeah, they probably should. But if they're engaging with it and just trying it out, and it might not be perfect at the moment, but keep using it, keep trying it, it is going to be the equivalent of taking your IDE away at some point in the future. So keep using it, and I want to, you know, in 2025, keep pushing it into iVendi as well. You know, pick a small project or team where we can, you know, try some stuff, because it's early days stuff, right? Still, right?
Sure.
But you know, if in the next year we can improve productivity by 1%, then it's better than not. And if we can do it by 5% or 10%, even better. So my aspiration over 2025 is to learn and try and use it more, because I, for one, am convinced it is going to make a big difference in the where it's already making a difference in the software engineering industry. And I want my team and the people that I'm working with to be well equipped to use it effectively, so that they can carry on their careers, you know, being productive software engineers or quality engineers or data engineers. You know, a lot of disciplines will benefit from it in the same way.
Yeah, it's here, isn't it? It's, you know,
Yeah.
So like it or not, it's here.
Yeah.
Get on board. Okay, that's really good view of that. And I think, look, last question, because I'm conscious of time. If you had to recommend a book, a podcast, a publication, a qualification even, do you think is useful for someone, what would you recommend? I'll
I can't remember his surname, but the Georg guy that does the Pragmatic Engineer.
Yes.
That newsletter is really good. I really like that. So I'd certainly recommend that. I also, I've been trying to stretch myself into, leadership strategy and things like that. And so an audio book that I keep listening to and dipping in and out of, and I've listened to more than once, is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by, I think he's called Richard Renault or something like that.
Okay.
I'm getting a lot of value out of that personally. It's not particularly technical, actually, so I don't know if it's the right audience, but I'm really enjoying listening to that and seeing what makes a good strategy. And it's quite general, but a technical strategy is the same, where you have to identify what the problems or opportunities are, how you're going to resolve it, and then put an action in place. That's what any strategy is. And so I've really enjoyed that. And then if you want a fiction one as well,
go for it. Yeah.
I really enjoyed, I say reading, but I actually do audiobooks mainly, so listening to the Century trilogy by Ken Follett. So it's a series of 3 books that's set in the First World War, Second World War, and Cold War, with the same characters threaded through it. And I just really like the way that it brings together historical events and with a sort of rich story and characters behind it, and so puts in context, what was going on at the time into a storyline. So I've really enjoyed that. So if you're looking for a fiction book, I'd recommend that.
Brilliant. And also, just while you were talking, I did search the Pragmatic Engineer by Gergely Oros.
That's the fella.
Orosh.
Yeah.
I butchered his name there. But yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Loads of nuggets of information on here. So I'm hoping a lot of people get benefit from this. And as always, great seeing you.
You too, Jack. Thanks.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Anything we talked about will be linked in the show notes. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll catch you on the next one.